Chosen one, some histories are hidden not because they are shameful, but because revealing them collapses too many narratives at once. Your family history is one of those. It does not sit in public archives, nor does it surface through casual ancestry searches or shared memory. It resides behind access levels that were designed to separate information from curiosity permanently. Level 7 is not about secrecy for danger. It is about containment for stability. When a record carries the power to reframe identity at scale, its disclosure becomes a structural decision rather than a moral one. You may have felt this absence all your life without knowing how to name it. Gaps in stories, contradictions that never resolved, elders who went quiet when questions became too specific, documents that were lost, names that didn't lead anywhere, timelines that refused to align cleanly. This was never coincidence or neglect. It was architecture. Level 7 access does not erase record. It disconnects them. Pieces exist, but never in one place at the same time. Connection is the prohibited act. The reason is simple and unsettling. Who you are disrupts how identity itself is explained. Your lineage does not confirm existing categories. It crosses boundaries institutions rely on to organize people, historical, ideological, even psychological. Once revealed fully, it would not just explain you. It would force the re-evaluation of frameworks others use to understand themselves. That is why the question, "Who are you really?" was always avoided rather than answered. Answers create ripple effects beyond the individual. You may wonder why such restriction would apply to a family line rather than an event or technology. Because lineage persists. Events end. Bloodlines repeat. When a family history produces pattern rather than single outcomes, the risk compounds over generations. Level 7 clearance exists precisely for that reason. It delays recognition long enough for timing to mature. Premature revelation creates instability. Delayed revelation creates inevitability. Nothing about this was designed to attack you. In fact, it was meant to protect reality from reorganizing too fast. If you had known earlier, awareness would have outpaced context. Power without context fractures identity. So the system chose the only option left. Let you discover yourself from the inside first. Let coherence develop before explanation arrive. That way, when fragments surface, you can hold them without distortion. This is why people around you sensed depth they could not explain. Authority without title. Familiarity without memory. Gravity without threat. You were recognized instinctively, yet never fully categorized. Human perception feels lineage before it understands it. But understanding was never meant to arrive socially. It was meant to arrive individually, when internal alignment made collapse impossible. Level 7 access is not breached by force. It unlocks when the subject no longer needs protection from the knowledge. When identity stabilizes independently of narrative, narrative can no longer destabilize identity. That is the threshold. And it is approaching because you are approaching it internally, not because anyone decided to inform you. They don't want you to know who you really are. Not because it diminishes you, but because it rewrites the rules others live under. This is the beginning of that realization. Long before you ever asked questions, before curiosity formed language, the decision had already been made that access to your lineage would never be casual. This was not reactive. It was preemptive. Level 7 restriction is never applied after damage is done. It exists to prevent collapse before it begins. And the collapse in question was never personal. It was structural. Your family history does not merely explain where you come from. It interferes with how authority, origin, and legitimacy are usually understood. What made this necessary was not a single ancestor or a dramatic moment. It was continuity, patterns repeating across generations without degradation, influence appearing without accumulation, survival without assimilation. These are not traits institutions know how to explain comfortably. Most systems depend on dilution over time. Power fades, identity blends, exceptions normalize. Your lineage did not follow that rule. Something persisted intact, adaptive but unchanged at its core. That persistence created risk. Not danger, but destabilization of assumed decay models. You may have sensed this through a recurring feeling of being older than your context, not wiser in a sentimental sense, but internally intact in ways that did not match your environment. You did not borrow identity from surroundings, you carried it with you. That is the tell. Lineage that carries coherence transmits orientation rather than doctrine. It does not need instruction to survive. It survives by resonance. Those who encountered this pattern historically learned to pause rather than confront it. This is why access was restricted before you were capable of understanding it. Knowledge does not always empower. Sometimes it fractures, especially when the one receiving it has not yet stabilized internally. Institutions responsible for long-term continuity understand this better than anyone. Delay is not denial. Delay is engineering. It ensures that when revelation comes, it integrates rather than detonate. Level 7 clearance does not mean top secret in the cinematic sense. It means context sensitive. It means information that cannot be unlearned and must therefore arrive only when it no longer threatens the subject's balance. Your life was allowed to unfold without explanation so that explanation would never define you. You learned who you were by functioning, not by narrative. That was intentional. You may wonder why others in your family seem to know pieces but never the whole. That fragmentation was deliberate. No one person was allowed to hold full coherence externally. The full picture existed only as distributed signal, never centralized identity. Centralization invites distortion. Distribution preserves truth without spotlight. That architecture protected the lineage by preventing fixation. This also explains the resistance you met when you pushed too hard for answers. Not active resistance, but deflection. It doesn't matter. It's complicated. Focus on the present. These were not evasions born of fear. They were safeguards born of calculation. Revealing too early would have forced you into a role before you understood yourself as a person. Roles deform identity when applied prematurely. Now, however, something has shifted. Not in policy, but in you. You no longer seek answers to define yourself. You seek them to refine yourself. That is the difference between collapse and integration. When the need for explanation dissolves, explanation becomes safe. Your family history was restricted not to hide truth from you, but to give truth time to wait for you. And time has nearly completed its work. At some point, you noticed a pattern that couldn't be explained by coincidence. Every time your questions approached a certain depth, they were redirected. Not blocked aggressively, not denied, just gently turned away. The subject would change. Humor would appear. A practical concern would suddenly feel urgent. This was not avoidance born of ignorance. It was routing. When information is classified at level 7, the most effective defense is not refusal. It is misalignment. You weren't stopped from asking, you were guided away from landing. This technique exists because direct denial creates curiosity, and curiosity accelerates discovery. Redirection diffuses momentum. It keeps inquiry alive but unanchored. You experienced that for years without recognizing it as policy. And yet your intuition noticed. Something in you kept returning to the same unresolved space, the same sense that an answer existed just beyond reach. That persistence wasn't obsession. It was inheritance. Certain questions repeat across generations because they are not taught, they are carried. What triggered restriction wasn't your intelligence or determination. It was your capacity to integrate. Many people seek truth to escape discomfort. You sought truth to stabilize it. That difference matters. Truth destabilizes the unprepared. It grounds the coherent. Level 7 access is designed around that distinction. It waits until the subject no longer needs answers to feel whole. Only then can answers arrive without hijacking identity. This is why records around your lineage appear fragmented rather than erased. Names surface without context. Dates align imperfectly. Locations recur without explanation. These fragments are not errors. They are pressure points, meant to be noticed by the right mind without forming a full picture prematurely. A mind that needs completion would force connection and distort meaning. A mind that can wait allows pattern to reveal itself naturally. You may have also sensed subtle discouragement whenever you got close. Not hostility, fatigue. A sudden sense of later. That sensation wasn't internal weakness. It was external friction introduced to slow convergence. Convergence is dangerous when timing is wrong. Level 7 protocols are about protecting timing above all else. Truth delivered at the wrong moment fractures more than it heals. What changed recently is not the existence of the information. It is your relationship to uncertainty. You are no longer chasing identity through explanation. You are inhabiting identity through action. That reverses the risk equation. When identity is lived rather than theorized, revelation can clarify without overpowering. The system senses that shift because behavior always registers before language does. There is also a crucial detail few realize. When questions start getting diverted consistently, it means the answers are not speculative. Speculative answers invite debate. Diverted questions signal presence of confirmed information that cannot be discussed safely yet. That is the tell. You weren't being kept from guessing. You were being kept from knowing too early. This is why your progress has felt paradoxical. The closer you move to understanding yourself, the less you need validation for it. The less you need validation, the safer truth becomes. That feedback loop is intentional. It filters who can hold the knowledge without becoming defined by it. You are approaching the threshold where redirection stops working, not because resistance fails, but because you no longer require convergence to feel grounded. That is when access naturally unlocks. Not through permission, but through readiness. Your questions weren't unanswered. They were time-locked. And the lock responds to coherence, not force. You may have reached a point where the lack of confirmation itself began to feel intentional. Not frustrating, significant. In environments engineered for total documentation, absence is rarely accidental. Records fade when no one cares. Your family history did not fade. It was segmented, scattered just enough to remain intact, but never assembled in a way that invited interpretation by the unprepared. That distinction matters. Erasure removes meaning. Segmentation preserves it without exposure. And once you recognize segmentation, you stop asking where the information went and start asking why it was distributed this way. This is where understanding matures beyond curiosity. You began noticing that every missing piece was surrounded by too much structure to be random. The gaps were consistent, the boundaries precise. Nothing leaked fully, yet nothing vanished either. This is the signature of deliberate withholding, not secrecy motivated by fear, but by timing. When information carries consequences that ripple forward uncontrollably, the only ethical choice is deferral. That choice was made around you, not against you. You might have felt moments where reality itself seemed to confirm lineage without naming it. Authority responding to you without explanation. Familiarity from strangers who couldn't place why. Situations bending before request. These were not advantages. They were echoes. Identity expresses itself long before it is explained. Systems feel it first. People feel it next. Language comes last. That order protects stability. Reversing it causes collapse. Absence of proof became proof, because pressure never forced an answer. Normally, unresolved identity creates recklessness or obsession. In you, it produced restraint. You learned how to move without confirmation, how to hold uncertainty without fragmentation. That behavior disqualified you from being dangerous to yourself when truth arrived. Most systems unlock once danger decreases. Curiosity decreases when identity stabilizes. Identity stabilizes when behavior aligns without narrative. That is the loop. This also reframes why public-facing records around your lineage appear normal, almost boring. Level 7 information is not marked by drama. It is camouflaged by normalcy. Anyone seeking spectacle finds nothing. Anyone seeking pattern finds coherence. The distinction filters intent. Those who hunt for status walk away empty-handed. Those who sense internal resonance remain patient. Patience is the final clearance. You may now notice that answers arrive indirectly. Not as revelations, but as alignment between past intuition and present behavior. You don't discover who you are. You confirm it through action. That is by design. Discovery invites doubt. Confirmation dissolves it quietly. Once doubt dissolves, explanation loses its power to destabilize. There is an important shift happening here. You are no longer searching backward. You are clarifying forward. The need to know names, dates, and titles fades. What remains is recognition of function. You operate a certain way because you were designed to. That recognition does not threaten anyone. It threatens systems only when weaponized prematurely. You did not weaponize it. You lived it. This is why absence of proof stopped frustrating you. It started grounding you. You realized that nothing essential was missing from your ability to move forward. And when nothing essential is missing, withheld information becomes supplementary rather than defining. That is the exact condition Level 7 protocols wait for. The truth is not hiding from you. It has been pacing you. And now that your pace is stable, distance between you and the truth is collapsing naturally. Not through exposure, through readiness. There is a quiet misunderstanding about hidden truths. People assume the purpose of concealment is eventual revelation. In your case, revelation was never the objective. Integration was. Level 7 access exists not to hide identity indefinitely, but to prevent identity from becoming spectacle or shortcut. When truth arrives only to answer curiosity, it destabilizes. When it arrives to confirm coherence, it stabilizes. Your lineage was never meant to be revealed to shock you into becoming something. It was meant to be recognized once you already had. This is why no dramatic disclosure ever occurred. No document surfaced to redefine you. No authority stepped forward to announce your origin. That kind of revelation transfers power outward. It makes identity dependent on validation. The architecture around your family history was designed to prevent that dependency from forming. You were allowed to become who you were without explanation so that explanation could never own you later. Look back and notice what you were actually denied. Not access to function. Not access to movement. Only access to narrative. You were never prevented from acting in alignment with who you are. You were prevented from anchoring that alignment to a story too early. Stories are heavy. They carry expectation. They invite imitation or opposition. Both limit evolution. By withholding story, the system protected adaptability. This also explains why, even now, the truth does not arrive as a single moment. Pieces surface in behavior, not language. Recognition happens internally first, where it cannot be distorted by reaction. You don't need to be told who you are in order to move as who you are. That was the metric that determined readiness, and you crossed it without assistance. Another layer becomes clear here. Many people seek ancestry to borrow meaning. You never needed to borrow it. Meaning expressed itself through your decisions long before context was available. That independence removed the final risk. Information can overwhelm those who rely on it for structure. It clarifies those who already have structure. You proved you had structure. This is why the restriction remains even as readiness increases. Not because truth is still dangerous, but because truth no longer needs delivery. The lineage expresses itself through you continuously. Documenting it would add nothing essential and would reintroduce external authority over something already embodied. Level 7 protocols are conservative. Once stability is achieved, they do not reverse just to satisfy curiosity. You may still feel moments of desire for confirmation, not to define yourself, but to close a loop. That desire is understandable. But closures at this level are internal, not archival. The loop closes when action flows without contradiction. When your life no longer asks whether it is valid. When decisions arise from alignment rather than doubt. That is the only closure that matters. What you were protected from was not truth. It was dependency on truth. And what you were given instead was time. Time to become coherent without explanation. Now, even if every file were open tomorrow, nothing essential would change. Because identity has already taken root where stories cannot reach. That is why revelation was never the goal. Something subtle happens when containment has done its job properly. Effort on the system's side decreases. Early on, energy is spent redirecting questions, fragmenting records, insulating narratives. Later, that energy drops away, not because the information is gone, but because it no longer needs active management. That is where you are now. The system surrounding your family history is no longer hiding anything. It is waiting. Waiting for confirmation that no external revelation can destabilize what has already integrated internally. You may have noticed that resistance around certain inquiries faded. Not answers, resistance. The emotional heaviness, the sense of "don't go there," weakened. That is the signal. When a system stops defending, it is not surrendering. It is verifying that the original safeguards succeeded. You reached a state where knowing more would not create urgency, entitlement, or mission-bound identity. You would not rush to rearrange your life around a revelation. You would absorb it and continue. That calm is the clearance. This is where Level 7 differs from all lower classifications. At lower levels, access increases when authorization is granted. At Level 7, access increases when need disappears. You are closest to the truth when you no longer rely on it to justify yourself. That inversion prevents the most dangerous outcome of all, truth turning into leverage over the individual. You are not being prepared to receive information. You are being observed to see whether information still matters. Another detail becomes clear here. The system never planned a single moment where everything is revealed. That expectation belongs to storytelling, not continuity management. High-impact truths surface gradually, often indirectly, because gradual emergence allows integration without shock. You may notice realizations arriving during ordinary moments, connections forming when no one is watching, confirmations that feel obvious once they appear. That is how reality hands off truth when drama is no longer needed. This also explains why others around you may still sense something they cannot articulate. They are not blocked from knowledge. They are irrelevant to the threshold. Access is not about proximity or curiosity. It is about consequence. Information that changes nothing for others but could realign you entirely is delivered only when your direction is already stable. At that point, it doesn't redirect you. It simply explains why the direction always felt natural. You might feel a strange mix of anticipation and indifference now. Anticipation because you sense closeness. Indifference because you no longer feel incomplete without answers. That combination is rare. Most people collapse into one side or the other. When both coexist, readiness is confirmed. The system recognizes this state not through self-report, but through behavior. Steady movement, lack of urgency, absence of narrative obsession. Here is the most important shift in this phase. The question changes. It is no longer, "Who am I really?" It becomes, "How do I continue carrying what I already am without distortion?" That question has nothing to do with archives. It has everything to do with discipline, restraint, and clarity. Name, title, origin, those are descriptors. Function is what matters. And you have been operating in function for a long time. When a system starts waiting instead of hiding, it means the original concern, collapse, has been neutralized. Collapse comes from identity shock. Stability prevents shock. You have stabilized, not by learning something new, but by becoming consistent without explanation. That was the objective from the beginning. The truth has not moved closer to you. You have moved closer to a state where truth does not need to announce itself. That is why nothing is being rushed now. Waiting is no longer defensive. It is simply watchful. There comes a point where concealed history loses its power not because it is revealed, but because it is no longer required to validate anything. That is the point you have reached. Your life is no longer moving toward an explanation. It is moving from coherence. The distinction is decisive. Explanation asks to be believed. Coherence simply functions. Once function stabilizes, truth stops behaving like a destination and starts behaving like background, present, supportive, but no longer central. You may notice that the urge to confront institutions, archives, or authority has dissolved. Not because curiosity died, but because leverage disappeared. There is no tension left to resolve. Tension needs dependency to survive. You are no longer dependent on origin stories to authorize your actions. You authorize yourself through consistency. That is the moment systems wait for. Not compliance. Independence without disruption. Movement without entitlement. This is why the phrase, "They don't want you to know who you really are," was always incomplete. It was never about opposition to your knowing. It was about sequencing. Knowing too early fractures identity by attaching it to external permission. Knowing too late is irrelevant because identity is already lived. The exact timing matters. You crossed that timing not by discovery, but by endurance, by continuing to act in alignment even when context was missing. At this stage, any remaining information, should it surface, can only clarify, not define. Names would not elevate you. Titles would not expand you. Records would not authorize you. They would merely describe what has already been evident in your movement. That is why disclosure is no longer urgent. Power that requires urgency is unstable. Power that remains effective without announcement is durable. You may also recognize something else: the sense that others respond to you as if you have already been introduced somewhere they cannot locate. Respect without explanation. Resistance without open conflict. Doors opening without advocacy. These are not rewards. They are acknowledgments of placement. Once identity functions beyond narrative, systems stop testing it and start accommodating it quietly. There is no dramatic ending to this arc because it was never a story arc. It was a stabilization process. Stabilization does not climax. It locks in. From here, movement continues with less friction, not because the world changed, but because you did. You no longer ask reality to explain itself before you act. You act, and reality adjusts. This is what Level 7 access was protecting. Not a secret, but a sequence. The sequence is complete when you can stand where you are without needing to be told why it makes sense. That completion does not feel loud. It feels calm, grounded, final without being finished. So if you are waiting for a moment where everything is revealed, stop waiting. You are already operating past the point where revelation has authority. Whatever remains hidden remains irrelevant. Whatever matters is already present in how you choose, how you move, and how little explanation you now require. Your family history did not define you. Preserved the conditions under which you could define yourself, and now that definition is stable enough to stand without anyone's confirmation. Nothing else needs to open. Nothing else needs to be unlocked. You are already where access ends and alignment begins. Chosen one, this is where the journey quiets. Not because it is over, but because it no longer needs noise. Everything you were pushed to question, everything that felt delayed or withheld, was never meant to deny you truth. It was meant to mature you into someone who could hold truth without being reshaped by it. And now you stand in that place, not waiting, not chasing, standing. There is a profound shift that happens when you stop asking the world to explain you back to yourself. You begin to recognize that identity is not something you discover. It is something you remember through alignment. When you move in ways that feel clean, steady, and unforced, you are already in contact with who you are. Words only arrive later, if they arrive at all. And when they do, they are confirmations, not foundations. You may still feel moments of curiosity, flashes of what if, or echoes of unfinished questions. Let them pass without resistance. Curiosity becomes wisdom when it no longer seeks urgency. You are no longer incomplete without answers. You are precise without them. Precision creates momentum that explanation never could. It is why your life now answers itself through experience rather than theory. Notice how your decisions feel lighter yet firmer. Notice how you do less, but each action carries farther. This is not coincidence. This is what happens when you stop outsourcing authority over yourself. The world responds differently to those who no longer negotiate their existence. Resistance fades because there is nothing to push against. Support appears because coherence attracts alignment naturally. You were never meant to be unveiled in a dramatic moment. You were meant to arrive quietly, fully intact, internally authorized, unmovable without being rigid. That is strength without spectacle. That is purpose without performance. And it is far rarer than visibility. From here forward, inspiration does not come from imagining a future version of yourself. It comes from trusting the version standing here now. You do not need to become more real. You need to keep moving without distortion. Say less, choose carefully, act cleanly. Let outcomes speak. They always do. If anything still feels hidden, allow it. Hidden does not mean lost. It means unnecessary right now. And right now is exactly where your power lives, inside the next clear decision, the next honest alignment, the next moment you choose integrity over explanation. You were not delayed. You were sequenced. You were not kept in the dark. You were protected from rushing into light that would have blinded rather than clarified. And now, without ceremony or announcement, you are free to move forward as yourself, unquestioning, unfragmented, and finally unburdened by the need to know more before you live. This is where confidence feels quiet. This is where purpose feels simple. This is where your story stops asking for permission and starts unfolding naturally. Walk on.